I believe one of the things my mother taught us was that people are people the world over. You don't have to have a different color skin for people to treat you differently or to be minimized. You can have that in your own culture. And so she wanted us to know that we were all important people, be it the Puerto Ricans or the Caucasians or us. We were all of value. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I went to the same high school that Jesse Owens went to school. It's East Technical High School, and Jesse Owens gave us a motto, and his motto was, do the best you can where you are with what you have. And so that's been what I've lived by, if you will, all my life. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was what they called a ditch digger. And as they were building the highways and byways in the city, he was going along digging, opening up the side, digging ditches. My goal in coming out of the high school, back then, it was Bobby Brooks was a manufacturer in the area, and so I wanted to go work at Bobby Brooks. But then when I found out that you would have piecework wages, and I didn't want someone ahead of me slowing me down or impeding me getting a salary. So I took Bobby Brooks and that technical aspect off my plate, and I started working for the Ohio Bell Telephone Company. Yes, lots of protests, and like I said, the inequality, the injustice, and people really speaking up saying, we want our voices to be heard. We have a right to have better opportunities as other people have. And we have a right to better jobs, better education. Some of the things that we were getting in the inner city, we were getting books that the white schools would throw away. And so we weren't able to compete equally because we were getting old information as opposed to updated information. And it was a hard time, but it was a time of unity. When my husband, we were over in Germany when the United States was going through a real hard time and President Nixon was going through the Watergate, and they were offering the people early out, and my husband took the early out. And then he wanted to finish his education, and so Lawrence, having been recommended, that's what brought us to Lawrence University. But I wasn't really interested in coming to Wisconsin. When we came back to Appleton, it was interesting because it was winter time, so you didn't see a lot of people. But at the same time, when you'd go into stores, you didn't see people that looked like you in any of the stores. We lived right across the street from, back then it was Gimbel's, but we were up and down the avenue, and people didn't say it, but people weren't used to black people in the community. I wound up applying for a job at the telephone company, and they didn't have permanent employment, but they had temporary employment. So I worked at the Wisconsin Bell for a time, 6 months. They had temporary employment. And then I heard Kimberly-Clark had a switchboard, and I applied at Kimberly-Clark, but for a month, they didn't call me. And in that month that they didn't call me, they had tried other people, but they had no telephone experience, and it didn't work for them. Somebody couldn't hear, somebody couldn't go fast enough, and I worked on the switchboard for 3 years, and after that I went into what's called consumer services, and I worked in consumer services for 10 years, and back then we handled communications from all over the United States. And I had the household product line, the high-dry towels, the high-dry toilet paper, and we had Kleenex Soft-Teak, and so those were the products that we handled, that my area handled communications on. So it was really the complaint department, but that was a better name for it, consumer communications. As a Black professional, one of the things that we looked at was education. There were many Blacks coming into the area, but they were all very highly educated, highly qualified. But I think one of the things that worked for me was my experience. Having had experience with the telephone company, having been experienced in the communications area, going to Fox Valley Tech, different classes, and I didn't want to be dubbed in terms of administration. So I went from the switchboard into the communications area, and then I got into research. And in the research arena, I was on the team that helped make Kleenex facial tissue and did lots of testing there. And then I went from that team into the Huggies pull-up, and then we were hand making these pull-ups, and we were stretching these elastic strands across, and somebody said, an engineer is going to help us build a machine to make this product. It's like, yeah, right. Well, sure enough, they came up with Huggies pull-ups. I'm a big kid, look what I can do. And then I was on the team that helped bring all of that equipment together, and then we sent the machine over to England, and some of these engineers went to England to build that Huggies pull-up machine. When I relocated here, there were times that people would come up and rub their hands across my skin, and back then I didn't think of it. It wasn't until much later I thought, they're checking to see if my collar would come off. Because I had these two little children, a lot of people thought I was their caretaker as opposed to them being my own children. There was a lady that worked at Gimbel's back then, and I didn't realize that she was following me through the store. And I later learned from the lady that she was a security officer, and their role was to follow people of a different color. And I remember looking for apartments, and the different people would show me these apartments, and they were dives. You couldn't pay me to live in those places. And the people were saying they were doing me a favor by letting me have these places. And as a matter of fact, one of the places was condemned and torn down within days after this guy had showed it to me and acted like he was doing me a favor. There was no way I was going to move into that place, and it was condemned and torn down. What do you do when you don't know what to do? When you're looking for places and you have to stand on your own, and you don't make a big issue because there were no other people here like me. And I didn't know of organizations to go to get help. You had to do for yourself. And I think the diversity efforts that Kimberly-Clark started along with Thrivent, and I don't know of all the other corporations, but I know of those two that were very invested and involved in bringing people from other communities, other cultures here to work, not only with education, but also with regard to being community oriented. We have to continue to reach out. We have to not look at people because of the color of their skin or the background. We have to take people for what they can bring and what they offer. And those of us who are here, be it part of the community or not, we have to also reach out and help.